Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joel Amadon.
And I'm Ann Monroe.
And this is The Road to Better Teaching, a podcast series where we discuss stories of teacher development.
We got a good one with us today, Joel.
Yes.
A good teacher, a good friend, a good colleague. So I'm excited about this.
Kick off 2023 with some... So I'm putting my hands in the air.
Yes, because you
podcast.
Just don't care. Well, I do care, Joel.
Awesome. We have Ellen Shelton.
Ellen Shelton is with us.
Fantastic. Ellen, thank you so much for joining The Road to Better Teaching. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking me to be here.
Well, and, you know, there's... I mean, we had not talked that much. I have known of you before I knew you because so many people have talked about experiences that they have had with you in your work here at the university. And could you just give a quick intro so people know who you are and what you do?
Okay. Thank you for that comment, by the way.
It is true.
Yeah.
I mean, just to
It
cite
is.
you,
Yes.
like, hey, Ellen Shelton, she did this, and this. Ellen Shelton, and I'm like, who is it? And then obviously Ann knows you too. It was just like, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I got to meet Ellen Shelton.
Oh, thank you. Wow. Stakes are high now. Yeah, I guess I've been on this campus off and on since 91. Came here for grad school and left for a little while, taught, but also I'm going for, if you know this campus, I'm going for the Maury Sevtink theory of how many titles can you have before you retire.
Yeah.
So I am officially the director of the writing project here at the University of Mississippi, part of the National Writing Project, and that's been 21 years, but affiliated with it for 26.
Wow.
I'm the director of pre-college programs over in the Division of Outreach, which is an awesome sort of space to think about K-12 education. I am a lecturer in writing and rhetoric. So I teach a Writing 340 class that works with pre-service teachers for the most part on writing composition theory. And this year I'm the interim writing center director for undergraduates with the Department of Writing and Rhetoric. But I've been around a long time just doing different things. So thank you for that.
And then, Ellen, tell everybody what you did prior to coming to the university.
So I actually taught high school for 15 years. I was the high school English teacher at Thrasher High School in Prentiss County for 6 years, and then primarily 11th grade English teacher, AP, and compensatory teaching at Tupelo High School for 9 years. So I've been around in and out. So
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah, so I remember Ellen one day, she was in my office, and I think you saw my Thrasher elementary mug. And I taught at Thrasher, but it was a totally different Thrasher in a totally different state. But so Ellen's, a lot of the interaction I have with folks, like Joel, you said, a lot of people on campus know about Ellen and the work she's done and she's influenced them, but also people who have, I've encountered have influenced, Ellen's influences from when they were in high school. She was their English teacher, and we actually have a brand new colleague here in the School of Education that works with us, Leslie Joblin, now with the one of our communications specialists. I believe you taught Leslie when she was in high school, and she's a big Ellen fan, I'll say. So that's kind of neat that you have that influence, from K-12 all the way through higher ed. So I think that's awesome.
And we'll put a link to Leslie's grades from English class here in the show
absolutely.
notes.
Yes, Leslie will be thrilled, I'm sure.
Awesome. Well, and again, that's what's cool about having these conversations is like Ann just said, I know of your experiences here at the university, or the things that a couple of, not all of the things, a few of the things from here at the university, but then learning about the experience as a high school teacher, and that's awesome. That's great. So when we're here on the Road to Better Teaching, we do this little countdown into getting to your mile marker of professional development as a teacher. But so the first thing we ask people to do is to thank 3 teachers who have shaped your development as a person, as a teacher. And
that was a really hard question. You think about this is actually my 31st year of teaching total. And I was like, oh, wow. I think about the students. I think about who I learned from, my colleagues. Huge influence was Sherry Graydon in my master's degree. She's the one who sort of said, you know, you really are a good writing teacher, and you're a better writing teacher than you are a literature specialist. Thank you, Sherry. And kind of put me into a teaching space. Those folks like Ben McClelland, Peggy Emerson here on campus. I think about Larry Gebhardt, who was my orchestra director in high school, and I still play with the orchestra.
Tell them what
here.
you play, Ellen.
I play cello, except for
Cello.
Hello.
except for I sit in the back because I need the space to push the stand away so I can read the music better now that I'm old. And but
Are you a
sit with other
Yo-Yo Ma
faculty.
fan?
I
As
am
I
a
am.
huge Yo-Yo Ma fan.
Joel knows that I love Yo-Yo Ma.
Jacqueline Dupre, Yano Starker. Yeah, we can go on for hours. But, when I started thinking about this list, and I was like, only 3? And the reality is, if you don't think about your students as your teachers too,
Oh, yeah.
then you're kind of missing out on this amazing learning opportunity. So I think about my kids that I have this semester in my 340 class, and the conversations that we have, especially yesterday about language and audience and why we write, but then social media. Well, Pinterest was almost a little too far for me. I was like, that's the social media line.
That's the only one
I finally went to Instagram. But the reality is, she helped me think about some ways of creating language and persona on social media that I hadn't considered. So it was like, you grew up in this world. I didn't. I'm an adopter. You're a native. So what does that mean? And that was, one of those moments you go, oh, that's cool. How did I think about that? So,
Yeah, that's neat. Your students as your teachers, for sure.
Yeah.
I think every teacher feels that way, and for some kids more than others. And sometimes some of the challenging kids are the best teachers, or the kids that challenge you the most in terms of your teaching.
absolutely.
That's great. I love that aspect of your students being your teachers.
Yeah.
Which is great.
So, what about 2 reasons or events that led you to become a teacher?
I probably shouldn't admit this, but it's not private knowledge. I never meant to be a teacher. My mom
Oops.
was a teacher. Yeah, how did that happen, right? My mom was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. But I am a child of service. My father was a minister. Mom ended up a librarian in the city of Dallas. And so I realized I didn't want to continue in higher ed for a while. I needed a break, and I loved teaching comp classes. And I went alternative route through the School of Ed at that time. This is early 90s. And thought, well, I'll teach for 2 years and go back to Texas and figure out what to do with my life. My license was reciprocal at that time, from Mississippi to Texas. And then there's kind of an event. Your next question was about a mile marker. What are those things that keep you here? Why did I end up staying? And, I ended up realizing I love this job and I don't want to leave. And it was great. So I never meant to teach. I'm really glad that that I found teaching in a sort of different way. So much so, my first doctorate is in education and curriculum instruction. So, how do I become a better teacher? So,
Yeah. And I think, sometimes, I think right now, where, it's no secret, like, teaching is being attacked. And, even, when people say, if they wanted to be a teacher, even, sometimes that choice is second. But even, there's people that have, they were meant to be a teacher. And it's how are we encouraging them to use those gifts and abilities? Because that's an investment in not only themselves and using it and realizing what they can become, but then also all the different, think of all the students that we've all had a chance to teach that would not have had that if we would have chosen a different path. So Well, that's awesome that you.
I mean, if I had been a Broadway performer,
Right.
you know, like I was supposed to do,
Robbing
that
people
I
of
would
those
have robbed people of all of these gifts that I have. Anyway, I like to. I always tell Joel I was born to be a dancer, and then I just something went awry, and so I did the next best thing, teaching.
Teaching.
It's a joke, but yeah, I love that. It's I like that you're saying I enjoy it. Mm-hmm. That it was something I enjoyed doing. It wasn't any other reason than, hey, this is great and I like it, and you're enjoying the job. And I think for, like Joel was saying, there's a lot of issues right now with teaching and recruitment and all of those things, and I think people forget that teaching can be really enjoyable. And I try to tell my students that, like, I had the best time going to school every day. I really enjoyed being in a elementary school. For me, it's like I love the smells, crazy as it sounds. I love the look, I love the feel, I love everything about the fun, every morning something new. So I love that you're saying that I enjoyed it. Hey, I like this. This is something I want to do more of. And I want to learn more about it, too.
And always, when I taught high school and I'd walk in and we were talking about some text or your piece of writing, and I taught 6 classes of sometimes the same course, which sounds a little dreary. But the reality was every class was so different. Every group had its own culture of that space. And what were the dynamics and how did they interact with each other? How did they interact with me? How did we learn from each other? I mean, that's exciting. You get up and you are interested in what kids say. I might be having a bummer of a day as an administrator here on campus sometimes. And I go into my 340 class and we have a conversation and it's like, oh, that's why I do this, right?
It lifts your spirits, yeah.
And reminds me that I'm still learning.
Yeah.
So
I like to, and just seeing a parallel between our last episode where Morris Dox is sitting into this tutorial, and he's like, because he's a graduate student, he's in charge of the solutions manual, which just meant basically like, hey, if you are having trouble, look at the manual. And then he sees like, well, everyone's having the trouble with the same thing. It was like this irresistible force to be like, why don't we do something? Like, why don't I just lead something here? Like, it just like this irresistible force to step into that position. If that felt like, that's kind of the same message that you're sending as well.
Absolutely. And I think when teachers feel confident in what they're doing, they know their content, they are always looking for new strategies. Sometimes I'd learn something, read a book, or go to a workshop or have a conversation with a colleague, and it'd be like, I am so going to try that out. I mean, I'm doing it all the time on my computer. I just have a list of like cool things I want to implement. And I kind of consult it when I look back at how I'm planning the next lesson.
Yeah.
So,
and that makes the job fun too, and exciting and new and different, and keeps it fresh.
It's like you got a lab. Like,
yeah,
I love that.
It's fun. Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm going to try this out and see how it goes. So we kind of previewed it. We kind of like got a little teaser. So what is this mile marker on your road to better teaching?
So, 2 years in to teaching, I enjoyed it, but I was looking for something else. When you're the only teacher in a small school, you don't have a huge community. And who are you going to talk to about, why am I having to teach Canterbury Tales? And, I mean, sorry, medievalists, we're good. But just not my area. I'm a composition person. And so Ben McClellan sent me, or actually called me at that point in time. We didn't email. He called me and said, hey, Ellen, you need to be a part of the Invitational Institute with the writing project this summer. And I very politely told Ben, I'm probably going back to Texas in a year. Why are you going to spend tuition money and a stipend on me? We had stipends then. Sadly, we don't now. But I'm going back to Texas. Why would you spend that money on me? And he goes, yeah, I got a hunch. Come on. And Ben was a mentor of mine. And I said, okay, if Ben says to do it, then I guess we do it. So I spent a month here in June with the Invitational Institute and I never left the state. I ended up.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
And Ben was an English professor.
Ben was an English
at the time,
professor,
yeah.
and of course, I got to know Susan McClellan through his wife. Through also, she's a writing project fellow, and I found a community. I found a network of teachers that wanted to talk about what does it mean to teach writing, anything literacy, by the way, in any discipline, K-16. And it's what kept me here. So if I think about that, it was that phone call, this personal invitation of a mentor who said, you need to do this. And okay, Ben says do it, I'll do it. I don't think I'd still be in teaching. I think I really would have left after a year or two. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't have that space. Or I may have been in teaching, but I probably would have been back in Texas. And instead, I found this amazing community of practitioners who wanted to talk about how do we become better? How do we learn? I was introduced to new theorists that I hadn't been. I still hang on to my Tom Romano Clearing the Way with my little, Sherry Graydon introduced me to him, but then I was introduced to Donald Murray's work. I was introduced to Ken McCrory. This is in the mid-90s, so we're starting to look at Nancy Atwell's in the middle. We're looking at those early practitioners that were coming out of the sort of that expressivist movement in writing. And then I found sort of what we now call social justice, or the social constructivist sort of vein of National Writing Project work about writing can promote equity. And that became a thread for me throughout my entire career, so much so that I stayed on with the writing project. Some other work, if you offered it, I was like, sign me up. And eventually became a co-director, got to work with amazing folks like Kathy Stewart, who's awesome. And there's another person, she's the one that sent me into the doctorate here while I was teaching high school, and said...
Was she in teacher education at that time?
She was in teacher education at that time. She was also the national board...
right.
The...
World-class teaching
program.
Yeah.
And informed me that the national board standards were just being released for high school a year or two after that. And so she said, "You're doing this?" And I said, okay. You have smart people that tell you what to do. You say, okay. And, I certified. I will now finish. I've done the recertification twice now, so I'll finish 30 years as a national board certified teacher, even though I'm not in the classroom. I did borrow a classroom for the last round. But, it's all about getting better, but it's also about meeting people and finding out different ways to talk about what we love. And so, it's that one phone call what is that one invitation? I think about what are the relationships? You talked about Leslie. I think about Lauren Wright-Jones, who's over in the Center for Diversity. I think about Jason Wilkins, who's over in outreach. There are several former Dr. Shelton people running around this campus. And I ran into one yesterday sitting with engineering and at lunch, and I said, "Hey, Alex, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, hey, well, I finished in engineering. Yours was the only English class I liked." And they occasionally invite me. He's an engineer now, and they said they occasionally invite me back to talk with their classes. And the engineering folks only know me through pre-college, and they know I teach, but it's nebulous. And here's Alex sitting there going, "Yeah, she was my high school teacher." And I was like, "Look, guys, proof. Here's somebody that actually has survived that part of my world." And but it was just, how do you here's somebody. He graduated before Leslie, so this is a good 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And we stood in Rebel Market and had a conversation about, what are you doing now? And it's so exciting to see you.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
And you kind of straight. I'm gonna ask a question just in case there's anything else. The importance of this to your growth as a teacher, the importance of when I'm gonna put some terms on this shoulder tapping moment by Ben McClellan to say,
right,
"Hey, I think you should come." And I guess I'm going to ask a question. Do you do that? Do you find yourself doing that where, like, you're the person where somebody else is going, okay.
Yeah, I do. I sometimes, believe it or not, and most people who know me from this professional space don't believe it, I am an introvert at heart. I play an extrovert really well, and then when people I'm around, I can be that way. So sometimes I don't invite people because I'm afraid they're too busy or they don't want the invitation. There's still that insecurity I think you always have when you're a learner of, I might be rejected. But I do find myself going, I find teachers in writing project that say, well, I'm here because you asked me to be here. Or I'm here because you made a space for me and I saw myself in that space and I felt like it was an invitation. So I think Ben would probably just go, what? And I think I've told him this before, that you're the reason I'm still here. And he goes, well, I just gave you a phone call. But I think we underestimate the power of what that is to
invitation.
say, Kathy Stewart in the middle of the Institute said, I think you should go back to for your doctorate. And I didn't want to go back to English at that time. And I was teaching, and she said, go talk to Peggy Emerson, who was former chair.
She was the chair teacher at the time, I'm sure. Right?
And I went, okay, I guess I'm in a doctoral program now, And my GRE scores were still good at that point. And, it's somebody saying, hey, I think you'd be good at this. And I think you need this. And I think we discount that.
Yeah.
I remember who tapped me. Same, I mean, when have predicted I'd be here in Mississippi? Like,
Yeah.
15 years
I
later.
mean, my family still goes, yeah, we lost her to the kudzu. I go back home to Texas and visit them, and they're like, yeah, I mean, it's somebody tapped you, and you said, this is the space I want to be.
Nice.
Yep.
And so we talk about, the moment being important to you, but then we also talk about the importance of the moment to the field, like in this thing. So I don't know if you had a chance to peruse some of those standards and see, because this is something that we ask our candidates to do, where they're thinking about, how am I growing as a teacher, and like, how does the field look for how I should grow? And so I don't know, did you have a chance to
I did, actually, and I was, when I looked at it, everything under content, everything under instructional practice, professional responsibility. When I think about where I've come, what I'm doing in pre-college programs, which doesn't seem like an education background, but everything we do is about supporting learners on our campus and inviting them to this space. So how do I, as an administrator here, how do I lead my team in an educational component? So, I mean, the leadership skills I learned through the writing project, through amazing principals. I got to give a shout out to two. I was lucky in 15 years, I only had two administrators, and I'm the one who changed schools, which is rare that you get to keep. Bill Buse and Matt Curley. And they allowed me to grow. They allowed me to make mistakes. They had conversations, but they let me do what I needed to do to be the better practitioner. And if I wanted to go to a workshop, cool. Do we have the funding? Do we have the days? Can you go? Let's make the space. Hey, I want to do this. That, I think, was so influential in being able to say, I want to try that. And so I think about like the content knowledge of, I want to go find out what this workshop's about. And I want to be a better AP teacher. So I said, I don't want to go to this workshop. I want to go to that one because this is the content I want. And Matt Curley said, okay, we'll make that happen. And, and then I got to talk with other people about how do we, how does that work in the classroom? What are those strategies? What are other learning strategies? I love working with new teachers because they come in with such enthusiasm, and I'm like, okay, how did you do that? How are you doing this in a digital space? I'm still kind of old school. You guys see my notes. I've written them on paper, and I've handwritten them, right?
Right.
With a pen.
With a pen, yeah. There's something about that whole writing, the physical writing process, not just fortunately, I'm the only one who can read these, but half the time. But what are those things that we, how do you do that? Because my kids are in this space. So I'm trying to learn what that is. And it's, I think about how many of these standards, I think about my work with the writing project and that invitation, and it's hit every single one of these.
Yeah.
It's not just about literacy. You learn development. I don't know that I would have gone back for a doctorate. I don't know that I would have done national boards. I don't know that I would have done so many things without the confidence level, that leadership development, and that sort of like, okay, you should be able to do this. Okay. And, what are those things that you do, but also the ethics of you've got to become a better practitioner. And they're changing. I haven't kept up with the music. It's kind of sad. But you can pretty much tell where my music tastes end about late aughts, right before 2010 when I left the classroom, because I'm not getting the kids' exposure to music anymore like I was in high school. But, I'm trying. Writing Center kids are trying to teach me about it. It's kind of sad right now. But, what is that? I have an ethical obligation to keep learning. And to figure out what that means for this group of kids. So,
and I do think too, like that ethical responsibility and professional responsibility of continuing to learn, and that you were talking about earlier. And I think that's connected to the fact that you like what you do, and that you're enjoying it, and so you want to, think about it. You want to reflect on it. You want to try something new. And so it's this sort of openness because you're enjoying what you're doing that you want to experiment with it. You want to try new things. And then also take the time to think about, did that work? Did that not work? And we always talk with our teachers about being reflective practitioners. It's good to try things, but if you don't reflect on what you tried, it's like assessment. You're not really doing anything unless you're checking in to see if it was working or not. But this whole cycle of that you're talking about, it's an ethical responsibility as a teacher, professional responsibility, but also I think it easily happens when you love what you're doing because you want to go in there and do better for the kids, and you want to try something new because you're interested in it, and you want to hear the next thing and go to the workshop, and when somebody says, hey, you might be interested in this, you go for it because you want to be better because you're enjoying what you're doing. And I think that enjoyment part is really important in teaching, that if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to do a good job. You're not going to grow because you don't want to try new things. You're not going to want to think about what you were doing and reflect on it, so you're not going to be better, and the kids suffer.
And you have to be able to say, wow, that didn't work. Why?
Yeah.
What did I not do? Don't blame it on the kids.
Right.
Because I know it succeeds. Too many times I think I hear people going, well, it's the kids. No, the kids are fine.
Yeah.
Every X amount of years, we have an education crisis. The kids can't read, they can't write. We now have, they're going to cheat using the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
The reality is, kids are fine. And if something's going wrong, what did you do to implement that space, right? And if you don't think about that, if you say, oh, it's the kids, well then, okay, you should be thinking about it when you're doing the dishes, right? Or you're driving home and you're contemplating, okay, that class didn't go as well as I wanted. Only having one section of a class is a little harder because when I taught high school especially, first period knew something was going to go amok because it was also pre-9 a.m. for me. Seventh period knew it was like awesome because I'd had a chance to revise every class. First period knew I'm not a great writer. They would see the rough drafts. Seventh period would go, oh, I see how you revised across the day. Because I kept that up. And then first period would walk back in the next day and go, oh, well, that's a lot better. But you still could change X.
Yeah.
When I hand my own current writing, a journal article I gave to a writing center consultant, I said, if you don't have a consultation time, I need a review of this. And she's an education English ed major, by the way. And Marika gave me one of the best reviews.
Is it Marika Hall?
Marika Hall.
We love Marika Hall.
She gave me one of the best reviews. And I had edited it. I'd had multiple other professionals, but she could see it through a very different set of eyes. And being able to say, I trust you to teach me something. And y'all, the suggestions she made were brilliant and spot on. And it just was like, okay, you get the credit when I make this into a book because you're going to have to help me revise this. Not edit, revise this, because you got to trust that too.
Yeah, that's great.
But also being able to say, it's not perfect, fix it. So.
Think about I was just thinking about the moment, probably that Marika,
Yeah.
that Marika had, that Dr. Shelton asked me to look at, and just to say that what the message that says, right? And like, just about, you said that exchange between learning from students and things, and just like, it's fluid, right? You're the teacher, you're the student, and like that moving, I don't know, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and Marika will have her own English classroom
Yes.
in about 1.5 years, which is exciting.
I know. Isn't it weird?
It's great.
It's awesome. I don't want her to graduate, by the way. Can we talk her into grad school so I can keep her?
So we ask our students to come up with these like pocket-sized philosophy statements. And so, do you have a pocket-sized philosophy statement?
I think I've articulated it in a much longer version, but I mean, teaching is about learning. It's not about delivering content. It's about learning. You learn new content. You learn new strategies. You learn from the new generation. To teach is to learn. And if you ever stop, Anne knows this. I'm going for my second doctorate. I'm actually taking my second comp next Wednesday in composition rhetoric because, I don't know, COVID, post 50, either let's do this degree or don't. We don't have this degree here. I'm having to go to another institution. Talk about, oh my goodness, being a total student again, and how do you navigate their parking system? And sitting in there and realizing you're older than your professors, for the most part, and my committee members. I could be the cool aunt for one, and biologically I could be the mother for the other. My advisor is older than I am, but which is some piece at 53. But what I'm learning there is going straight into what I'm teaching and saying, guys, I just read this article. I know we were going to cover this, but I want to weave this in. And they see me excited. And then it kind of shifts to them like, wait, she could have retired 4 years ago. She's still here doing this. What? She's doing a what? A second doctorate? Because why?
Yeah.
But and I got to admit, it's much cooler on this side because it's just like this whole layering of new knowledge. And I'm not going to say it's always fun. Didn't love a few points of it, but what of any program do you love every single moment? But it has taught me so much about what it is to be a student again.
Yeah.
And then how I learn and how do I translate that. And hey guys, I have a paper due and doing peer review. I'm going to put myself in this peer review, and somebody's going to get dropped in the Google Doc from my paper, like I'm responding to yours. So, and I'm like, hey, it's just, at this point, it's just Ellen, the writer, the student, not Dr. Shelton teaching. I need you to review this. I need responses because I'm kind of stuck on this part.
Yeah.
I really, y'all, cannot write an introduction to save my soul. I have to work through the whole paper and then go back and do it. And to have somebody make, hey, I like this part, but you really need to think about this. Oh, I thought that part worked well. Well, not so much. I think that's, if you stop learning, you stop growing. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a great model for your students too. And it's the extra benefit of it is that they see what that looks like and that's the process. It doesn't stop. Yeah.
Who are the theorists I'm getting to learn now that I didn't get to learn? That I just, there's so many journals, so many magazines, so many books. You cannot read them all. So now I'm getting a chance to explore all those people I didn't get to because I didn't have time. And now I'm still finding there are even more journals that I need to be reading. But that's overwhelming and exciting.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
Great.
That's tremendous. That is great. Anything that made you think of, Anne, when we're thinking of like resources. I mean, one is Ellen mentioned a lot of different authors and things before, but anything that came to mind when you're hearing about Ellen's mile marker?
Well, not specifically an extra resource, but just sort of a shout out to something she mentioned. Nancy Atwell's In the Middle, that book was given to me by Cindy Lee.
Ah, I loved Cindy Lee too.
Yes, and it's down in my office if you want. It's very old, but that sort of, and it sort of goes back to this Ben McClellan tapping you. Joel is using that term and saying you should read this, and that was not a textbook we were using at the time, but it was something Cindy was teaching a language arts class, and she said you should read this and look into this. And it's just, opened my eyes to what the writing process could look like in a classroom and what that ownership, kids owning that process and being a full participant with the teacher in that process and all of that was excellent. So, and I think that's like an older book that people probably aren't really thinking about much anymore.
Yeah.
But, particularly those people that are interested in teaching that age range, that kind of middle grades, middle school type age range. What does that look like in terms of giving kids agency and involving them in the writing process? It's a good one to go back to.
Yeah, that one. And by the way, the first edition is the better edition of that one. Like I said, Tom Romano's Clearing the Way, I still refer back to. Actually, I put it on my comps list. So that's how much that book really informed my theory of how to, the pedagogy. I think, too, Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher now have kind of picked up the mantle where we see Atwell's, like, now, but they're also dealing with the realities of the assessments that are required. But what could that writing instruction look like in our contemporary classrooms? I like their thoughtfulness in
I'll
that.
have to check that out.
So Penny Kittle especially. I like Kelly Gallagher. Both a writing project, by the way, so it's another sort of thing about how do you think about, they're part of the National Writing Project work. But yeah, I really like how she talks about reading.
Okay.
And reading. We treat, especially in English, you have grammar, you have reading, literature, and you have writing. The reality is they should all be taught together. So how do you integrate all of this in one space? Because it's all about communicating ideas. But we treat them as separate disciplines too many times, and they're assessed differently. And so, but if you're talking about communicating and communicating ideas, what did you gain from your reading, and then how are you communicating that through whatever medium? And you got to think about grammatical and structure, but you also have to think about communicating your ideas and how did you develop those ideas.
Yeah.
And so they do a pretty good job of integrating.
And we can link those things to in the show notes.
The
as
show notes, yes.
Joel always says.
Well, and I have the same argument about math. Like you should not have these algebra, geometry. They're statistics.
It's all, right?
They talk to each other, and we do these artificial separations, which really gets me angry. Anyway.
Well, for global thinkers like me, that makes sense, right? It just, I don't understand. Why are they different?
Yeah.
All of this is one big blob,
Right.
So, anyway.
Yeah. I taught an integrated math class when I was teaching high school, and it was like this most beautiful thing. I felt like I was robbed because like you get like this huge dose of algebra. It's like eat all of this broccoli, and then it's like, well, there's these other courses too, but it's like no, we're just gonna feed you nothing but this for a year. Then okay, now it's nothing but potatoes. That's not a great meal. Like it's like give everything. Sorry, that was a tangent. But the other thing, so one thing, and I've had a lot of development around this. I don't really have a resource to connect it to, but it's this whole idea of like when someone has tapped you on the shoulder, like Ben McClellan tapped you, and it's not just about the tap. He developed a relationship with you, a trusting relationship, and also developed in you like a mentoring relationship where there's an expertise, where there's trust, so like everything that went into that tap and that resulted in like that there is so much there, so that that students now have a belief in themselves because they know that this person cares about me. This person has seen my expertise, knows me, that when they provide this thing that might be scary, it might even be like, I don't know why but I trust this person to the point where now I'm going to say, okay. And I mean, like having those moments, and as teachers, you get to see students sometimes more than their parents on a daily basis, and just have those I see in you statements, or even like I see in you, like my undergrad degree took 5.5 years because I don't think anyone ever said you should become a teacher. It was like I kind of stumbled into it. Versus somebody did say, hey, you should get a doctorate. It took me less time to get a doctorate than it took me to get my education degree, because like someone's like pointed me in that direction. It was like, and I trusted that person. And so I just the power of that, and like just I have an emphasis on that shoulder tapping, and I see in you. I see that you could do this. I see in you this, and that means you could do this. Like
I think about well, it was a text that I had been introduced to before, and then in my doctoral seminar class, I revisited it. My dad was a minister, but he was also a theologian. Martin Buber's I and Thou, to me, and Peggy, I think, gave it in the doctoral seminar. We recovered it. And I think this also goes with that social justice theme. I mean, you think about Bell Hooks, you think about Lisa Delpit.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think, and occasionally I've tried to teach I and Thou to my undergrads, and they just go, it's one of those really good ideas that it's maybe they're not ready for it yet. It's like, thanks, Dr. Shelton. We tried. Like, oh, sorry about that. But, your students in your class are not it. You're not delivering content. If you think about it as an I thou that Buber talks about, you're receiving back from them, and you see them as someone not only to whom to impart your knowledge, but also they give that back. And the minute you see your kids as an it, like they don't have anything to offer you, then you've lost the relationship, and you've lost that sort of connection with them. You have to see your students as they're individuals, and some kids, bless them, it's all they could do to get to school.
Yeah.
And then other kids, they're there because that may be the only safe space, or they're there because they just enjoy your class. Now, you're not going to connect with every kid. It's just a reality of being a human, but you can try.
Yeah.
And I think maybe language arts people have that ability, because when we teach writing, we get to know more of the individual language. I'm sorry, Joel, I can't read. I try with math problems. I try. But, how do you get to know that word choice says so much about that child, or that sentence structure, or that one little descriptor? And then you think about what is that relationship you can form with that student in that space. And you might not have that relationship with them outside. You probably shouldn't, because that's not their world. This is the space in which you inhabit. And that book was really pivotal to me. And again, Dad had given it to me at some point when I started teaching. I probably didn't get it. It's one of those books you need to revisit every now and then, because you suddenly figure out, oh, that's what he means.
Yeah.
And Peggy's class was a lot like that. Like, oh, I get to revisit this space. So
That's great.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Ellen. Thank you for
thank you so much.
sharing your time, expertise, and your mile marker on your road to better teaching.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you all out there for listening and tuning in to The Road to Better Teaching. This episode may be over, but The Road to Better Teaching never ends. Please subscribe to the podcast so you're notified when the next episode is ready for you to listen to. And if you like what you hear, please rate and review the podcast.
You can also share the podcast with someone you feel may be interested in these stories of teacher development. And if you want to find any links to resources mentioned, you can check out the show notes for this episode at roadtobetterteaching.com. Finally, thank you to all of you listeners out there for taking the road to better teaching. This world is a better place because you have used the gifts you have been given to teach others. This Road to Better Teaching podcast is an Amazon Planet production.